Welcome classic rock fans to another top 10, the 10 best debut albums ever. If you're new to this channel, please do click like, subscribe and check that notification bell. It makes all the difference. Well, that's that said. And check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work done at Classic Album Review. It's always much appreciated. Become a Patreon, why not? There's a fine body of work on my Patreon now, and we're forming a real classic rock community. Anyway, enough of this piffle. Let's get on with it, shall we? Number 10 is the Velvet Underground and Nico from 1967. This New York band's debut was a cultural shudder that reverberated through the 70s and 80s, manifesting itself in the androgynous sexuality of glam and the raw noir of punk, not to mention the lithium-induced death rattle of grunge much later on. This album didn't sell, but those that bought a copy went and formed a band. Well, that's how the story goes anyway. It's an album of fearless breadth and lyrical depth, with Lou Reed cataloguing a deviant behaviour, carnal desire and drug addiction, making the whole thing feel a bit voyeuristic, but nevertheless furnished with a kind of pop wisdom that Lou Reed acquired whilst working for a writer at Pickwick Records. And John Cale, that multi-instrumentalist, introduced that drone that underpins these numbers. And Nico, she brings a European sophistication, I think, to the proceedings, with this statuesque presence and her voice like a cello waking up in the morning. And let's not forget Warhol's Banana Sleeve, which many at the time found a little bit unappealing. Number 9 is Patti Smith's Horses from 1975. Many argue that this album anticipates new wave whilst having one foot in the punk camp. Smith as a performer is as steeped in 60s garage rock as she is in French symbolism. And take a track like Land, for example, which carries on from the Doors to the end, making her kind of a wannabe successor to the leather-trousered cock-jiggling Lizard King. And John Cale, a respected name, certainly respected Smith. And the primitivism of this musical, what she was trying to achieve, that had almost an equine grace, shall we say. And the loose improvisational song structures work beautifully with her free verse and poetic digressions to create something very special, I think. And Gloria, with her opening line, certainly seized the hearts and minds of the rock lovies. In the words of Patti Smith, Horses was the sound of a beat poet dancing around to a simple rock and roll song. Number 8 is the Cars and their debut album from 1978. This self-titled album had everything from new wave cool rock oomph and icy synths. And Rick Ocasek's lyrics flitted from ironic detachment to sort of passionate angst, moods that all contribute to making this album so damn good. With this album, the Cars embrace the sound of the future, but also the past, which is why everyone feels very much at home with these songs. As Ultimate Classic Rock states, the Cars had it all: the looks, the hoots, beat romance lyrics, killer choruses and guitar solos that pissed off your parents. They straddled new wave classic rock as well as unabashed pop. In fact, the Killers frontman Brandon Flowers said when he inducted this band into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they were able to exist in that highly coveted sweet spot where credibility and acclaim meet huge commercial success. Number 7 is Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn from 1967. This collection of romantic whimsy is drawn mainly from the paradigms of folk and myth, with their sing-song nursery rhyme cadences that draw us into the world of Sid. Heavily influenced by the writings of Hilaire Belloc and Lewis Carroll, it all helps form this childhood landscape before, in the words of John Betjeman, the dark hour of reason takes root. These carefree numbers collated on this album I see as the pinnacle of British psychedelia, which prompted a legion of other bands to start singing about toy shops and teapots, and even prompted that R&B prodigy Steve Winwood to decamp to the countryside and start singing warbling about Berkshire poppies. What a great and influential album. Number 6 is the Sex Pistols and Nevermind the Bollocks from 1977. John Lydon said, if the sessions for this album had gone the way I wanted them to, this album would have been unlistenable for most people. As I've said in my video on the Sex Pistols, this album feels, musically at least, fairly orthodox, drawing from influences like the New York Dolls and the Faces and Bowie, T-Rex even. For me, the real magic of this album is contained in that voice, that anti-singing and those wonderful lyrics. Even listening to this album today, I still get the hairs standing up on the back of my neck. We have Johnny Rotten singing about hatred and anarchy, not to mention the topic of bodies, of course. This is the Sermon on the Mount of UK punk, and it's, in the words of Noel Gallagher, it's the sound of everything changing. Number 5 is Frank Zapper and the Mothers and Freak Out from 1966. This is one of the most ambitious albums in rock history. It was a satirical album that took a sideward glance at the cultural landscape of 1966. Hugely influential record, influenced a lot of Zappa's contemporaries, including Paul McCartney. It deconstructs rock conventions left and right before pushing into territories inspired by more avant-garde composers like Stravinsky and Varese. The first half is made up of satirical and catchy numbers that question the assumptions made about pop music, opening with the nonconformist call to arms in Hungry Freak's Daddy. Freak Out quickly posits the Mother's invention as the very antithesis of those teen idol bands that Zappa enjoyed roasting via these sneering mockeries. And we get the more experimental stuff as well. Music concrete, amelodic dissonance, shifting time signatures to build what can only be described as a befuddling listen. Freak Out undoubtedly contains the blueprint and all the rudiments that would underpin Zappa's work for the next 30-40 years. Although minus the S&M stuff and poodles, of course. Number 4 is the Jimi Hendrix Experience and Are You Experience from 1967. In 1966, Hendrix beamed down onto British shores from God knows where, a spaceship en route to Mars, no doubt. His guitar playing skills were just otherworldly. From screeching feedback to that guitar sound that very much defined the 60s for me, that wah-wah sound that Hendrix seemed to love so much. His tone was astonishing, and the guitar solo became an entity in itself, no longer a device to provide a link between the bridge and the final chorus. It became a blatant exhibitionism within the paradigms of this band's impressionistic blues. Hendrix's solos were bursts of colour, which were certainly in opposition to the album's dour sleeve, the UK version anyway. The album is full of daringly innovative material, from the feral sexual strut of Foxy Lady to Fire with its off-the-wall funk feel. And let's not forget, on the original US release, we've got the very wistful The Wind Cries Mary. He was one of the most iconic rock stars the world has ever seen, and that is certainly a legacy, and that legacy starts with this album. Number 3 is The Doors and the debut album from 1967. One of the greatest debut albums of all time, with that twisted Joel Brodsky sleeve, which was effectively emulated for the Stooges' first album. What kind of band at this time would include a cover of a Kurt Weill, Bertolt Brecht song on their first album, and the rambling Oedipal drift that is The End? The Doors were unique then and now, mashing up Indian ragas with blues, jazz, psychedelic rock and bossa nova beats. Jim Morrison was like an LSD shaman, twisted, unpredictable and absolutely fearless, just as we like our rock icons. Not everyone was a fan. Of course, Paul Simon said take away Morrison's theatrics and the Doors just become a kind of a cocktail lounge jazz band. And considering the albums the Doors did after Morrison's departure, shall we say, he might well have had a point. But I love this album, from the 7-minute Light My Fire, which effortlessly morphs into this trance-inducing cosmic freak out, to the psychedelic hymn that is The End, with its drone-like raga, leading us very much into the heart of darkness. Number 2 is Led Zeppelin, their self-titled album from 1969. Some might dismiss these early, bludgeoning blues rock compositions as just examples of thievery. But as Rolling Stone points out, it's not what Led Zeppelin play, but it's how they play it, harder, faster and hairier than anybody else. When Plant roared in with that voice he'd beaked from Steve Marriott, and that mane of hair and that tight-trousered strut of his, I think we were witnessing something quite unearthly. And with timeless numbers like Good Times, Bad Times, Communication Breakdown and Dazed and Confused, this record was the sound of the British blues movement becoming increasingly more testicular, and certainly pointing towards a merging with the burgeoning metal scene. There's no doubt this album is the sound of a cultural levee breaking, and with the punk velocity of Communication Breakdown, with the ornate Babe I'm Going to Leave You, this album really is quite stunning. And number 1 is King Crimson and the Court of the Crimson King from 1969. This album has left an indelible mark on the prog genre with that tortured sleeve, reflecting the eerie beauty that very much defines this record. Epitaph, for example, that beautiful guitar phrasing against that wash of mellotron. This band bring together all these strange musical idioms, all drawn from folk, jazz, blues, rock. How very prog of them. And this genre bending provides the blueprint that would inadvertently lead to grown men in capes and albums sprawling across 4 sides exploring Hindu Shastras, and men in strange tights singing about the invasion of Russian weeds, Herculean Mantagazzi. This cross-pollination of musical form is explored and given its own virtuosic sheen on this record. When it was all finished, there was a sort of glow of satisfaction, said lyricist Pete Seinfeld. With the twisted proto-metal stylings of 21st century schizoid man, probably one of the finest album openers ever, placing this record pretty high on that list of awesomeness, from a band that had Mick Jagger sweating like a glass below his arse. So there you are, that's the 10 best debut albums ever, in my humble opinion. If you were to allow me to have a few honourable mentions, albums that were just nudging at the top 10, I'd have to include the Chicago Transit Authority. What an album that is. The first 2 albums are just fantastic. And of course Van Halen's debut, that's a stunning piece of work, if ever there was one. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. Please do click like, subscribe, check that notification button, and please share this video. Share this video on Facebook groups and Twitter and all those sort of things. It helps the channel grow. Anyway, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is, hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.